Hello everyone and welcome to the 27th episode of Japanese Phonetics by Dogen. In this episode, we'll continue to cover pitch accent at the sentence level. Specifically, we'll be talking about how to develop a mindset and study habits that will have a positive impact on your spoken Japanese. This lesson will be a little bit more abstract than usual, but I think that the ideas and concepts presented here are just as, if not more important than what we usually cover. With that out of the way, let's begin. Now, we spoke about this a little bit in the previous lesson, but the key to sounding natural at the sentence level is to not put in excessive effort. We covered two big rules in the previous couple lessons, the first being pitch stays high until a downstep occurs, and the second being incrementally lower the pitch with each downstep. We want to be conscious of these rules when listening to Japanese, but not when speaking. This is because, one, over-reliance on these rules often results in a lack of prosody, and two, these rules simply give us too much to think about during a conversation. The whole point of learning pitch accent is to sound natural, so it's counterproductive for us to try and apply rules that more often than not make our speech sound labored or fragmented. Thus, when it comes to these more advanced concepts, we want to try and pick up things through osmosis. But what exactly does this entail? This question leads us back to something I introduced in episode 4 as the most important piece of information I can give to anyone trying to develop native-like Japanese. That's right. Phonetic awareness. I tried to stress just how critical this concept is as I was introducing it, but this meant doing so without the context of the 4 basic pitch accent patterns or any of the rules that we can use to assume the pitch accent for various words. Now that we've covered a large amount of specific pitch accent information, let's revisit phonetic awareness to see how we can actually use the concept to develop more natural Japanese. Let's take a minute to zoom out and reassess our studies. By now, I imagine that most of you have started to pick up on the 4 basic pitch accent patterns in everyday speech. You probably have moments when someone says a word and you reflexively think, that was heibang, or oh, that pattern was definitely odaka. That said, this can take a bit of time, so don't be too frustrated if you're not yet regularly picking out the 4 basic patterns from everyday speech. When I started studying pitch accent, I also couldn't distinguish certain patterns, despite having concentrated on pronunciation for the previous 6 months. It literally took me 2 hours with the native professor before I could differentiate between saiko and saiko. But I kept at it, and after a couple weeks, I began to hear the various pitch accent patterns. I wasn't, however, able to reproduce the patterns for a fair amount of time. I imagine that this is the stage where many of us are. We're beginning to hear the various patterns, but our ability to reproduce the patterns hasn't caught up just yet. Now, we know that compared to anyone who never studies phonetics, a year from now, our pronunciation and pitch accent will be relatively stronger. Our ability to pick up and differentiate the various patterns will eventually trickle down into our own speech. That said, we can accelerate this process using a practice I've recommended several times before in the series: recording yourself. Because we now have a heightened sense of phonetic awareness, that is to say, because we're beginning to differentiate between the various pitch accent patterns, we can now effectively leverage this ability to improve our own Japanese. We now have the ability to begin fixing the errors that we never realized we were making. But why is Dogen talking about recording again? This additional context is interesting, but it doesn't change the practice in any inherent way. Correct, but I hope it provides an additional impetus for you to actually engage in the practice. Based on my own personal experiences and observations, many people never actually record themselves. This is because they either underestimate the practice's effectiveness and default to a different exercise, or because they believe in the practice's effectiveness but are scared about finding flaws in their Japanese. I've also met many people who have tried the exercise once or twice but then end up giving up because it can be difficult to chart progress. If you belong to either one of these groups, then I have a challenge for you. This is homework. Start a phonetics vlog on YouTube. You can make it private, make it public and share it with the world, or you can make it unlisted and share the videos here with a community of other motivated individuals. The important thing is to engage in the practice and to do so on a regular basis. I've been releasing videos in Japanese every Monday for a year and a half, and I still notice new things. I'm challenging you to match me. You don't have to write a script and you don't have to edit. You can do word level, sentence level, or paragraph level, and the video can be 1 minute, 5 minutes, or even an hour long. You can repeat words that you find on Forvo, sentences from a Japanese textbook, or lines from your favorite Japanese movie. The important thing, again, is to engage in the practice. I encourage everyone who can to post videos here. I imagine it will bump the motivation of the entire community. And this brings us back to the original subject of today's video: how to sound natural. It may seem like I'm contradicting myself when I say don't worry about certain rules when you speak and follow with record and analyze your speech on a regular basis, but there is a method to the madness. This method is as follows. Step 1. Try to be super aware when listening to Japanese. In other words, develop your phonetic awareness as much as possible. Step 2, apply your phonetic awareness to recordings of your own speech. And finally, step 3, when actually having a conversation in Japanese, as opposed to when you're recording yourself, assume that your Japanese is correct. This will allow you to speak with confidence rather than making you second guess every other word or phrase. In other words, be super critical during practice, but not during the game. We want to develop our Japanese accents, not the habit of second guessing ourselves. So when you're having a conversation, assume that your Japanese sounds fantastic. And it really should, because we're already studying things that most people never do. Okay guys, that's all for this lesson. It was much more abstract than normal, but I hope that you found it useful and perhaps motivating. I also hope that everyone joins in the vlog idea. While this is something I'd eventually like to expand into a separate website, I don't see any reason for us to not start here now. If you can, record yourself and post the link below. And if you have any feedback on this idea, please don't hesitate to let me know. In the next episode, we'll be returning to the traditional format covering question phrases. As usual, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to comment below. Thank you very much for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.